The cold had a way of settling into the bones that night, the kind that made the city feel hollow and uncaring. And as Marcus stood beneath the flickering awning of a downtown cafe in Ohio, he felt foolish for believing warmth could come from something as simple as a blind date. Snow clung to the sidewalks like regret, and his breath rose in anxious clouds as minutes stretched into hours. He had waited all night, checking his phone until the battery blinked its final warning, wondering if he had been forgotten or if he had simply hoped too much again. What if this were you standing there with expectation slowly turning into humiliation, asking yourself why you ever trusted a stranger with your heart? Would you leave, or would you stay just a little longer, clinging to the possibility that someone might still show up? Marcus had not always been this patient. Life had sanded him down after a messy divorce and years of working double shifts at a regional trucking office, leaving him quieter, more cautious, and painfully aware of how loneliness could echo louder than any crowd. He had agreed to the blind date after months of encouragement from coworkers who believed he deserved another chance at happiness, even if he no longer believed it himself. The cafe lights dimmed as closing time passed, and he felt the familiar ache of disappointment press against his chest. That was when he noticed her across the street, standing rigid near a bus stop that offered no shelter, her thin red dress stark against the white snow, one arm wrapped protectively around a small girl whose cheeks were flushed from the cold. The woman's face held a kind of exhausted bravery, the kind that came from surviving too many nights like this one. At first, Marcus hesitated, his mind offering excuses that felt safer than compassion. It was late, it was cold, it was not his problem. But something about the child's stillness and the woman's trembling posture unsettled him, stirring a memory of his own childhood when his mother had worked nights and prayed silently that strangers would be kind. He crossed the street slowly, boots crunching against ice, wondering what choice he would want someone to make if that child were his own. The woman's name was Rachel, and the little girl clinging to her coat was Hannah, and they had missed the last bus after Rachel's shift at a diner ran long without overtime pay. She was a single mother trying to stretch tips into groceries, courage into warmth, and hope into something that could carry them both through another night. Rachel did not ask for help, and that was what hurt the most. Her eyes held the guarded look of someone who had learned that asking often led to disappointment, and Marcus felt a quiet shame for all the times he had turned away from people like her, simply because he could. He offered them the warmth of the cafe's closed vestibule and his spare gloves, feeling the strange tenderness that comes when kindness finally outweighs fear. Hannah leaned into her mother, watching him with cautious curiosity, and Marcus wondered how many men had walked past them without seeing anything more than inconvenience. In that moment, his missed blind date felt insignificant compared to the human connection forming in the cold. They waited together as snow continued to fall, sharing silence heavy with unspoken stories. Marcus learned through gentle observation that Rachel carried the weight of the world without complaint, that she counted every dollar and every risk, that love for her daughter was the only luxury she allowed herself. He felt his own loneliness shift into something softer, something purposeful, as if the night had been guiding him here all along. Life had taught him to expect disappointment, but it had not prepared him for the quiet grace of being needed in such a simple, human way. What if this moment was not an accident, he wondered, but a test of who he had become? Marcus drove them home when the roads cleared enough to be safe, his old sedan humming steadily through the sleeping neighborhoods. Rachel watched the passing streetlights with tired eyes, and Hannah dozed against her shoulder, trusting without knowing why. There was no dramatic rescue, no grand declaration, only the steady presence of someone who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. Marcus felt something inside him loosen, a knot he had carried since his divorce, as he realized that love did not always arrive as romance. Sometimes it arrived as responsibility, as compassion, as a willingness to see another person fully. In the weeks that followed, Marcus could not forget that night. He thought about Rachel and Hannah often, about the way cold had tried to harden them and failed. He found himself volunteering at a local shelter on his days off, learning the names and stories of people he once hurried past. Rachel eventually called to thank him, her voice steadier, her life still difficult, but a little less lonely. They met again, not as a blind date fulfilled, but as two adults navigating broken paths, learning that healing was rarely linear and never easy. Their connection grew slowly, rooted in shared understanding rather than fantasy, and Marcus learned that patience could be an act of faith. Time did not erase their struggles. Rachel still worked long hours, and Marcus still carried scars from his past, but something had shifted. Hannah laughed more freely, the sound like sunlight breaking through winter clouds, and Marcus felt a quiet joy he had not known he was missing. He understood then that second chances rarely look the way we imagine. They come disguised as missed opportunities, as freezing nights, as choices that test our capacity for empathy. And sometimes the greatest love story begins not with attraction, but with a decision to care. Just before the final snow melted that season, Marcus stood once more outside the cafe where he had waited all night, reflecting on how close he had come to walking away from the moment that changed everything. He wondered how many lives brushed past each other in silence, how many chances for kindness were lost to fear or impatience. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think of a moment when you could have chosen differently, share your thoughts in the comments and let others know what choice you might make. The night Marcus waited for love taught him that it sometimes finds us when we stop looking for it, arriving quietly through compassion and courage, reminding us that even in the coldest moments, one small act of kindness can rewrite a life. If this story truly touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe so more stories of hope, regret, and second chances can find those who need them most.